Good morning. It is a blessing to be here. All of my years of ministry, this is my first time in First Unitarian Dallas. It's a real privilege. And thank you, immense thanks to Daniel for hospitality above and beyond early June days in a minister's life. So thank you to all of you for being here this morning. I am not going to ask that you dwell on the worst thing you ever did in your life on this beautiful summer morning. I'm simply going to ask us all to envision a world in which we were known or labeled simply by those acts. We're in the grocery store and we hear someone say, "There's that woman who yells at her kids." Or we are at a party and someone says, "This guy lied on his taxes." Or we make our Facebook profile, "I had an affair with my best friend's spouse." We are all human and we all do things that we profoundly regret. We all make mistakes. We all need mercy. We all need justice. And though Brian Stevens says perhaps, I say for sure, we all need some measure of grace. Some measure of grace, I believe, keeps the world going around. It's one of my core assumptions based on my own life experience and everyone I know, that every single person could be fired, divorced, or rejected almost every day with cause because we are all profoundly imperfect. But we know the miracle of someone extending kindness when we've just made a mistake, of someone giving us a second chance, of someone helping us out when we're stuck and can't figure out what to do. And while we all hope for such treatment, some of us receive it much more steadily and consistently than others. Universalism is grounded in the belief that God has profound mercy for every one of us, that God's grace is there for us all. Universalism arose in response to Calvinism, which proclaimed that some were saved and some were damned, and there was really nothing you could do about it. God determined before we were born whether we were saved or damned, and nothing about how we lived our life could change that. There is no shot at redemption or reconciliation if God has damned us. There was certainly no possibility for redemption in the eyes of the government of Georgia for Kelly Gissendaner. Kelly Gissendaner was given a death sentence for conspiring with her lover to kill her husband. The lover who did the actual stabbing was not sentenced to death, but she was. In prison, Kelly joined the CLF and also began to study theology. She became anointed as a chaplain in the United Church of Christ. She reconciled with her children. She repeatedly expressed remorse and repeatedly apologized for what she had done. Through the chaplaincy program, she began ministering to all of the other people in prison, caring about their well-being, living an exemplary life. Her children begged for the powers that be to spare her life. Even a letter from the Pope begging for clemency didn't have effect, and she was executed. Her last words to her lawyer were, "Tell my kids I went out singing Amazing Grace." The theologian Jennifer McBride, who had been one of her teachers in the chaplaincy program, wrote, "Do we really believe that people can be redeemed? Or do we just think that some of us who are pretty good, who aren't that bad of sinners, can and should be redeemed? Am I willing to obey Jesus' concrete commandments to love enemies, have mercy, and do justice? Do we understand that the good news of the gospel rests on this truth? God's justice is about restoration and healing, not punishment for punishment's sake. Most importantly, do we believe that God is powerful enough to save both victims and perpetrators of crime? Indeed, that this is what the reign of God is all about? When we look at the statistics behind mass incarceration, it is clear that the United States leans solidly towards a proclamation that some are worthy of mercy and some are not. Such limitations of who qualifies as human are in our DNA. We're there from our beginning as a country. The U.S. was founded on the premise that Christians deserved the lands of the indigenous people who already lived there, so it was not a moral issue to lie and steal and murder to acquire that land. Our country was founded on the premise that enslaved people are not really human and deserve no rights and count only as 3/5 of a person and count only in order to benefit those who claim to be their owners. Our government, like so many others, has always decreed who is worthy of humanity and who is not. And our country has always been a place where people like Brian Stevenson and so many others, including people in this room, fight to broaden out the understanding of what it means to be we the people. If I'm honest, I know how hard it is to actually practice Universalist faith. We saw new members this morning say, yes, I am going to extend the love of God to all. I'm going to extend the circle to everyone. Stevens is talking about embracing that viewpoint when he says that fear and anger can make us vindictive and abusive until we all suffer from the absence of mercy and condemn ourselves as much as we victimize others. And I don't know about you, but I do get vindictive and abusive, at least mentally. When my kid, who's now 22, was about 4 or 5, they said to me once, "We don't believe in that mean God, do we?" And I responded, proud that they had understood what I was saying, "No, honey, we don't." But they had another question. "But sometimes we really want to, don't we?" Yes, honey, we do. Yes, I do want to smite people to believe they will burn in hell, that when they do what I consider evil. When we look at the statistics behind mass incarceration, it's very clear that the U.S. rabidly embraces the notion that some are worthy of humanity and some are not. Some people just deserve to be punished. There's no hope. 70% of the people in prison and jails live below the poverty line. 70%. Only 15% have attended any college. Depending on which statistics you look at, somewhere around 6 times as many African Americans are imprisoned as a percentage of total population as white people are, with Latinos somewhere in the middle. There was a meme going around recently with a picture of one of the folks who, I think it was Felicity Huffman, who, bribed and cheated to get her kid into college, who was going to serve 4 months in jail. And it was up against a black woman who had lied about what school district her kid lived in so that her kid could go to a better public school. That mother got 10 years in jail. Felicity Huffman got 4 months. And that's what we see day after day. As the saying goes, 1,000 deaths is a statistic, 1 death is a tragedy. So this morning I want to share some stories with you about Unitarian Universalists I've come to know through ministry with incarcerated people that my congregation, the Church of the Larger Fellowship, provides. So first, a few words about CLF. We began in 1944 as an outreach to soldiers in World War II. Since then, we've served all kinds of folks, including expats, families of religious professionals, military folk, people who have just moved or are geographically isolated, people in nursing homes or hospitals, and people who just want more Unitarian Universalism wherever they are. Fully a third of our members now are currently incarcerated, over 1,000 people. So if you think about this congregation and the size of this congregation, that's about the same size as the folks we have who are incarcerated. If you think about all of the diversity and scope of your membership, imagine a comparably sized group of people who are incarcerated, and you can begin to imagine people that we never get to meet and gather together like this. Our mission is to take the good news of Unitarian Universalism everywhere we can. I get letters from these incarcerated folks, though not as many as the ministers who actually provide services to them. We provide access to reading materials and classes and a community with one another. The letters inspire and confound me and bring me up short when I'm wallowing in self-pity about something or another I'm contending with. I want to share one that I've reread often from an incarcerated person named Kenneth. He wrote it in response to a column I wrote in Quest Monthly, a CLF publication that goes out to all of our members and friends in prison and in the free world. Kenneth wrote this: I've been a member of the CLF since 2004. I've just had a really rough time the last few years. The piece that you wrote on resilience moved me to pick up my pen. I've been incarcerated 20 years straight, so it's a topic I know well. I'm 45 years old and have spent 25 years in prison. This is my second time. The first time I did 5. But you know, Meg, as I look back, it is clear to me now that I'm a conscious spiritual man that even when I was outside the gates, I was in prison in one way or another, be it the prison of poverty, drug abuse, family dysfunction, sexual abuse, and hunger. These were all prisons to me. Many of these were worse than the actual prison I'm in now, but the one thing that got me through was resilience. I never even understood what it was. I never knew the extent of my capabilities until I was tested by circumstances. I haven't broken yet after all these years, though I've seen several people commit suicide that had even less time to serve than me. This is why I so clearly identify with your piece in Quest. You were right on point. I've had to wake up willing to face another day in a place where love is something I'll probably never know, and where fear is something I'm forbidden to show. I've had to will myself not to become the beast that so many lost souls in here become. Being caged like an animal will cause someone with a weak mind to become an animal. I came here a drug-addicted madman with a death wish. I'm now a down-to-earth man with a life wish. I can tell you that I account for this transformation by having been introduced to Unitarian Universalism. In CLF, I found a home, somewhere where I don't have to worry about being judged or criticized because I believe differently than someone else. I found a place that gives me hope in the possibilities of life going forward, and a place where real love in its purest form exists. I'm writing a book called A Testament of Faith, Living the 7 Principles in Prison. I'll let you know when it's done. At any rate, enclosed you will find some writings from my cellmate. Will you please send him a new UU packet? Yours in love and solidarity, Kenneth. I don't know about you, but I can't wait to read Kenneth's book. The testament of his faith buoys up my own. And the generosity he shows in asking me to reach back to his cellmate is exactly how our prison ministry has grown from a couple of hundred people to over 1,000 in the years I've been in CLF leadership. It's the people on the inside with leadership and evangelism and generosity and hospitality who share the good news of Unitarian Universalism with one another. We don't advertise or proselytize. We won't even send Kenneth's cellmate a packet unless he asks for it himself. In order to become a member, all of our incarcerated members, unlike our free world members, take a class about Unitarian Universalism to make sure they're in the right place. These are devoted folks. Here's another testimony, this one from Ted. The conservative, evangelical, born-again theology I'd known in the Texas Panhandle taught that being gay was an abomination and a straight ticket to hell. God, they said, would not even hear me. Moreover, I could not hope for love in the only way I felt possible. My only slim chance to go to heaven was to live a lie, tell lies about whom or what I loved. The love of this community brought me back from despair. I've learned that not only do LGBTQ people belong in church and worship, but that many of us have been called to lead. I get very emotional when I read beautiful essays and stories by my people. And of course, now my people includes all UUs, regardless of sexual orientation. And to take it one step further, everyone on this planet, because we are truly a part of an interdependent web. Unitarian Universalism changed my life in myriad ways. Most of the hurt, anger, and distrust of conservatism has vanished. With a year or so left to serve on my violation, I am still dedicated to pursuing the life-changing faith that Unitarian Universalism has helped me develop. Of course, now as I near 50, life seems so very good to me that I'd like to hang on to it. Hell no longer seems like a possibility. My belief is that within each of us is a spark, an individuation of the divine, and the Creator would never punish itself. I'm still open to the idea of an eternal rave party surrounded by truth, love, and life. Hopefully for that I can get a good table reservation because I just can't dance like I used to. Thank you for saving my life, my soul, and for allowing me to share my story. Now, aside from the fact that I love the idea of heaven as an eternal rave party surrounded by truth, love, and life, I'm blown away by the astuteness of Ted's narrative. So many people in our prison ministry and without share similar stories where they were taught from earliest ages that their very essence was shameful, either because of sexual orientation or because of some other deviation from a profoundly narrow understanding of what is acceptable human behavior. To come to understand ourselves another way, to believe that each one of us is a spark of the divine, and that the Creator would never punish itself, that is soul-saving indeed. Some years ago, I was in an interfaith circle, and we were sharing why we do interfaith work. The first woman said, I was raised Muslim in Tennessee, and I was always told I was going to hell. I need an interfaith community with broader love and acceptance because Muslims are a religious minority in the US. I was next. I was raised Unitarian Universalist in West Virginia and was always told I was going to hell, I said. It was especially liberating for me to learn that not all Christians were as judgmental as those Southern Baptist kids in my neighborhood. And the next speaker, Welton Gaddy, was then the executive director of the Interfaith Alliance, said, I was raised Baptist in Louisiana, and I was always told I was going to hell. He said, I asked too many questions. I wondered about what I was being told. I needed a community willing to look at life with more complexity. That was the first time it had occurred to me that those kids in my neighborhood might feel as scared for their own souls as they proclaimed to be for mine. But each of us in that circle was speaking of our need for mercy, for grace. This is what Unitarian Universalism can extend to incarcerated members as freely as it offers to folks in the free world. This does not mean that we support some of the truly bad behavior that landed people into jail. It means that we refuse to define anyone by those singular acts, to reduce their humanity to a caricature. We don't ask people why they're in prison, but we do receive their stories and engage with them. And when I say we, I mean not only our ministers and staff, but also, and most importantly, their free world pen pals. One of the backbones of our ministry is a one-to-one relationship between our incarcerated members and Unitarian Universalists in the free world, where 5 or 6 times a year they exchange snail mail letters and talk about life and what's going on in all of it. We're always looking for more pen pals, by the way, and this is the opportunity that Daniel alluded to. If anybody in the room a pen pal now? It's a really wonderful opportunity, and we hear consistently from the pen pals that they receive as much or more as they give by being a pen pal. All of the mail goes through Boston so that your address is not shared with the incarcerated person, because there are cases where this would not be a good idea. Affirming someone's humanity does not mean having no boundaries or limitations. You can talk to me after the service if you'd like to be a pen pal. This is another conversation with my child, about age 4, I think. Mom, did you say that God is in every single person? Yes, honey, I did. Well, today God told me to shut up. Excuse me? Well, God's in Khalil, and Khalil told me to shut up. I am momentarily speechless, and my kid says, who else is in there? Who else is in there? Our human imperfection, which causes us to hurt one another, sometimes in truly horrific ways. One of the ways Unitarian Universalism has affected some of our incarcerated members is the ability that they develop, as Kelly did, the woman I talked about before, to feel responsibility and remorse for what they did, to truly begin to comprehend the pain they inflicted on others, to try to figure out how to atone, how to make amends. Here's a testimony from Justin. I've been incarcerated for 15 years. When I harmed my victims, I thought I knew a truth, but it wasn't the truth. As I grew and began to know myself, my truth began to solidify. And with the realization of the truth came the shame and guilt of the pain I'd inflicted on innocents. Now, knowing the depth of lies I'd entertained, I cleaned house, questioning every assumption and rebuilding the vessel I was to be worthy of carrying truth. I'd lied and lied for so long that the only antidote was radical honesty. Not easy when disclosing my crime could hold a death sentence rather than life. But where the light of truth shines, darkness and lies cannot abide. I'm okay, but within, well, I'm great. I can see the potential I didn't as a child and teen. I share freely the revelations, changing the world one truth at a time. I would hope that Unitarian Universalism had such a profound effect on all of us, that we all wanted to be vessels worthy of carrying the truth, whatever the lies we tell ourselves or the ways we deny the impact of our behavior on other people. For me, I know that proximity with people who are incarcerated, whom I am taught to fear and avoid, has brought a great deal more compassion and enhanced my capacity for love and for mercy. Not only do I gain perspective and remember all of the freedoms and privileges which are mine and which I too often take for granted, but I am shown the depth of humanity which is always available. No one is more devoted to spiritual practice than our incarcerated members. For one thing, they have time to meditate and read and pray. But for another thing, spiritual practice may be all that keeps them from becoming the beast that Kenneth described in that first letter I read this morning. Whenever someone tells me, as they do, that Unitarian Universalism is a faith only for the privileged, or that it isn't really sufficient to hold you in hard times, I shake my head and say, let me tell you a story about some of the finest Unitarian Universalists I know. We all need mercy, we all need justice, and we all need grace. I am grateful to be part of a faith which has always proclaimed the abundance of those things in our world and called for our responsibility to be co-creators of mercy and justice, trusting God's grace to oil the gears a bit as we fumble along doing our best. It's a privilege for me to be here in Dallas, where so many women worked for reproductive justice. And I got to have lunch yesterday with Mary Lou and hear some of those stories. And I hope you're all very proud of that work that led to the Roe v. Wade court decision, a decision which we're looking at teetering on the brink right now. I happened to be in Alabama the day that a very draconian bill was signed into law. And we're in these times where small groups of people fighting for justice have never been more important. And I hope you know and support the amazing work that Reverend Daniel is doing on behalf of women and on behalf of all of us for reproductive justice. And doing it imperfectly. The choice isn't to do it perfectly if we wait long enough and figure it out, or to do it imperfectly. The choice is to do it imperfectly or not to do it at all. And I'm always going to say, let's just fumble along and do our best. May the stories I've shared this morning support your faith as they have supported the lives of those whose stories they are, and of my life and others who come into contact with them. May we continue to refuse to condemn one another for real or imagined transgressions, extending each day another chance for life to redeem itself, saving ourselves and one another from damnation. And may we strive to live each day as a rave party surrounded by truth and love and life.